Peace talks between Ukraine and Russia have ended after an hour with an agreement to exchange more prisoners, but no breakthrough on a ceasefire. At the meeting in Istanbul, the Russian delegation presented a memorandum setting out its terms for ending the fighting. Russian media say they include a demand for Ukraine to withdraw its forces from the 4 regions that Russia annexed in September 2022. Ukraine has made no public comment about the document. Well, after the talks, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov called for face-to-face discussions between President Putin and President Zelensky.
The third point in our agenda is a meeting of leaders. We firmly believe that all key issues can only be solved at the level of leaders. And the leaders' meeting could be with possible involvement of other leaders, such as President of the United States. And we think that further work between delegations makes sense if it is aimed at preparing the leaders' meeting. We propose to Russian side to hold a meeting by the end of this month, from 20th to 30th of June. This is crucial for making progress in the negotiations process.
Well, let's see where we are in this with Tyson Barker. He's a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Europe Centre. Welcome back, Tyson. Looking at what's been reported about the documents detailing ceasefire conditions each side has exchanged, has either Russia or Ukraine made a suggestion that either side could say, oh, do you know what? Yes, I can agree to that. Is there anything from either side that the other can see something useful in?
I think, like most negotiations in such a fraught environment, it's going to be an accept everything. It's going to be an all or nothing kind of situation, because accepting one piece of it, the other side would probably take it off the board. And, you know, especially for the United States, which is trying to broker these conversations, they have been given what General Kellogg has called a term sheet of the 22 conditions that the Ukrainians would like to see, and wanted to match it up, lay it on top of the conditions that the Russians would like to see. And of course, what we've just seen, and many observers think that the Russians are not coming into this with good faith, is that they weren't willing to share those terms in advance of these discussions.
And should we presume from that unwillingness to share that the Russians are not really serious about these peace talks?
I think what we have seen is, as mentioned, a low-intensity willingness to engage just enough by the Kremlin to give some plausible deniability that they're not, that they are engaging. But at the same time, they're intensifying this buildup on the front. They are increasing their attacks, and they're looking to just give enough plausible deniability to say that we are engaging in the process without really doing so.
OK, so from a Russian perspective, that seems to be working. They are at the table, they get the photo ops, they are making grinding advances on the battleground. This seems to be working as far as they're concerned.
That's why the Ukrainians have basically said publicly, I think today, with Defense Secretary or Defense Minister Umerov, that it is really incumbent on these discussions to take place at the leader level, because these negotiations in the terms that they're taking place and the conditions that are taking place because Washington wants them to take place like this. And President Trump has set these terms to say that the only way to really have a breakthrough is to have the leaders meet. And the Ukrainians are coming to the table with that kind of offer. In order to have that meaningful breakthrough, it needs to be the leader level. Now, if that doesn't happen, what the Ukrainians are implicitly saying, and I think that they have European support, is that the United States needs to throw its full weight behind Ukraine in terms of providing more security assistance and potential consequences for Russia in terms of further sanctions.
OK, that would be a nice from the Ukrainian point of view if it happened. I don't think that it's likely at this stage. But let's just stay with these negotiating tactics. So we see that Russia appears in its own terms. Its tactics seem to be working. It's getting what it wants. It's getting a seat at the table. It's being seen to be taking part, and it's winning on the ground. What about Ukraine? Ukraine is all about publicly saying, well, look, we want peace. anytime, any place, anywhere, we'll be there. Is that working for them?
Well, I would dispute this on two fronts. One, I don't think it's working in the court of public opinion. The Trump presidency has basically staked its credibility on the fact that Russia is willing to come to the table in good faith. Everybody in the world sees that that's not the case. There's a great sense of frustration right now in the White House. You're seeing this also with Trump's primary allies like Lindsey Graham, who just made a visit to Kyiv and said we need to support Ukraine more and put pressure on Russia. So I think that the window of opportunity for Russia is really closing. And then in terms of what Ukraine is doing, we saw with the Operation Spiderweb that the Ukrainians continue to be very effective in trying to degrade Russia's ability to attack inside of Ukrainian territory. So this war of aggression by Russia remains very live on both sides.
And so that's interesting. As you see it, the political pressure on Donald Trump to be more active is growing to the point because the rest of us
his credibility is on the line.
Really?
Yes, because he has said my ability to bring both sides together, to act as an honest broker, to be a convener, is part and parcel to his political identity as a deal maker. He says, and he said this explicitly, it's not going to get solved unless Putin and I are at the table together. So the Ukrainians have said, we want to take you up on that offer. So now it is incumbent on him, because he has made threats in the past, even in his first week in office, saying if Russia is not serious about de-escalating, about ending the killing, we will need to impose consequences. And I think we've come to that point.
Tyson Barker from the Atlantic Council's Europe Centre, thank you so much.
Thank you.
DW's Julia Hahn is at the venue in Istanbul where those talks were held. Julia, the talks lasted just an hour. Just summarise for us what came out of them.
Well, we've heard from both the Ukrainian and the Russian delegation. They talked to reporters separately. What stood out for me from the Ukrainian press conference is that the delegation said while they had sent their peace proposal to Moscow in advance of today's talks, there has been no communication from the Kremlin, and they had only received the Russian memorandum today. So they say they need time to review the documents before taking further steps. But both sides have confirmed prisoner exchange, another prisoner swap, especially of those who are seriously wounded and sick, and those who are younger than 25 years. That's been confirmed by the Russian side as well. They will also exchange, they say, the bodies of fallen soldiers, 6,000 bodies each. And for that purpose, the Russian delegation's head, Vladimir Medinsky, a presidential aide to Putin, he said Russia suggests a 2 to 3 day ceasefire in specific locations along the front line to get this done. Ukraine has, as you mentioned, handed over a list of names of Ukrainian children that were abducted and deported to Russia. They want these children back. So actually a number of concrete steps both sides have agreed on here in Istanbul today, but no major breakthrough, no significant progress towards really ending this 3-year-long war, towards an unconditional ceasefire, for example. This has, of course, been the main demand that Ukraine has been bringing to the table, or as one Ukrainian delegate today said, the diplomats can only talk if the guns are silent. So this is something Ukraine will keep pushing for.
And Julia, no suggestion from either side of any kind of leeway in their demands?
Well, it seems to me that both sides are still far apart from each other when it comes to the conditions for actually making peace. And as we've heard there from the Ukrainian delegation head, Defense Minister Umerov, you've just played a soundbite. I think many here believe that a major breakthrough can only come about if there is really a meeting at the highest level, the presidential level, if Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin really sit down and talk. Only then can questions like a ceasefire be resolved. Interestingly, we've heard from President Erdogan after today's talks concluded. He said they went excellent from his perspective, and he was very quick to suggest that this high-level meeting could take place here in Istanbul, and he would be ready to host it, possibly also involving the US President Donald Trump.
So in terms of next steps, would the next step be that very high-level meeting, or will there be more of these kind of lower-level meetings happening? Do we know that?
Well, I think we will now have to see whether the steps both sides have agreed on today will now be implemented, possibly in the next days or few weeks. And I think for the first time we really have some sort of a possible timeline here with this Ukrainian suggestion for a high-level presidential meeting by the end of June. But let's remember, 2 weeks ago, during the first time of direct peace talks here in Istanbul, President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was here in Turkey. He was waiting for Vladimir Putin, but it was Putin who did not show up. So I think there's still huge skepticism whether the Russian president would really, come here to Turkey or to a possible other third country to really sit down and make that big move, because many Western analysts, they believe that Russia is really just trying to buy time to prolong the war, to make more gains on the battlefield, that Russia is not really interested in ending the war.
Julia Hahn reporting from Istanbul. Thank you so much.